How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, my fellow Americans. It is Eric Erickson here, broadcasting live from my flagship station, WSB, in Atlanta, Georgia, out across the fruited plain. The phone number, 877-973-7425. If you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you can get the live stream, the show notes, the podcast, and so much more. Georgia is ground zero, a swing state where I have long argued that Georgia is not actually as much a purple state or swing state as people think. There is a dynamic among suburban voters and Donald Trump that has made it swingier, and there are some demographic changes, but generally I think Georgia's still pretty much a Republican state. That being said, with Trump on the ballot, the state is a little more swingier than it might otherwise be. And one of the chief surrogates of the Trump campaign in the state of Georgia happens to be the lieutenant governor of the state of Georgia, Burt Jones, who's joining me by phone. Lieutenant Governor, how are you?
I'm great, Eric. Good to be with you today. I hope you're doing well.
I am. It was good to see you on Saturday. So you and I were up in Forsyth County, big hotbed of Republican support up there, and the early voting numbers of Republican counties compared to 2020 and even 2022 is just off the charts this year. It looks like the Republicans are turning out.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had, as you well know, record turnout all across the state. Over 3 million votes were cast as of yesterday. I'm sure there's going to be more at the end of the day. But, yeah, it's turning out big. There's a lot of energy on the ground here. And Trump was in town last night again. He was here a couple of times last week. So Georgia's a very important state. But I feel pretty good about where we are right now with a week to go.
So let me ask you this. Your role as a surrogate for the Trump campaign, a lot of people get designated surrogates. What does it mean in your case? I know you've been on the road. You were with him on the road yesterday, but also doing your own. For example, you and Jason Aldean were down in my neck of the woods. And by the way, I told you on Saturday I owed you an apology because your voicemail cropped up late with this stupid bait on my phone. But nonetheless, you and Jason Aldean were raising a lot of money also for hurricane victims, in addition to supporting the Trump campaign down in Middle Georgia.
Yeah, so my role for the Trump campaign has been going around and speaking at rallies or gatherings or get out the vote efforts. On the Jason Aldean front, obviously both he and I are both big Trump supporters, but it had more to do with the hurricane relief. Obviously we were hit pretty hard here in East Georgia by the hurricane that came through, and also President Trump helped us with that. He started a GoFundMe page, and Jason and I promoted it pretty hard, and we were able to raise over $7 million for that effort. So I've been out here hitting the ground pretty hard for the Trump campaign. Sometimes, Eric, I wonder. I'm not up for election this cycle. Sometimes I wonder if I'm not running though myself with the schedule that I've been keeping, trying to help out things. So I will be glad this cycle is over with, like a lot of folks, I think.
So now yesterday, you had massive crowds. You had a faith rally in Paulding County. You had the big rally last night at Georgia Tech, very right around where the Biden debate had been that blew Biden out of the water. I continue to be amazed, whether it's Madison Square Garden or elsewhere, the amount of people who travel hundreds and hundreds of miles to come see a presidential candidate. They don't do it for Kamala Harris.
No, you don't. It's something like I've never seen before. To tell you the truth, Eric, I don't know if we'll ever see it again. We were in Zebulon, Georgia, last week for a roundtable discussion there at a church, and we had literally thousands of people show up. And little old bitty Zebulon.
Yeah.
Georgia.
Okay. So let me interrupt you there, just to describe this scene for y'all. There's like a fried chicken house and a church, and in a field in Zebulon, Georgia, there's nothing, and just this massive crowd shows up.
Right. It's a pretty good way to describe it. Literally, I told somebody when his campaign came to town, probably that daytime population of Zebulon probably quadrupled. Just with that crowd there. But so yeah, it's something like I've never seen before in my lifetime. He doesn't need any musical talent or anything like that to come along with him. He just shows up and a crowd follows. So it's pretty remarkable, to tell you the truth.
So now, what are you seeing in terms of voting? And I realize you can only predict so much in terms of early voting here, but what's the data that's encouraging the Trump campaign in Georgia?
Well, the data that's encouraging is he's outperforming historical numbers with Hispanic votes. He's outperforming historical numbers with black votes, typically black males. He is performing well in areas that have not been that friendly to him in the past, and so all those things, you're seeing a lot of energy around his campaign and people who are going to vote for him, and you're not seeing a whole lot out of the opposing camp. So those are all, as you well know, having run campaigns yourself and been elected official yourself, those are all things that usually spell, like you're going to have a pretty good day when the election day finally gets here.
Yeah, so all the Democrats that I'm talking to right now say that the thing that gives them encouragement is women are turning out more than men in early voting. They feel like they have a good ground game, but I just keep looking at these areas like Rabun County up in northeast Georgia, even some of the metro Atlanta areas, Forsyth County, some of the South Georgia counties where Republicans, they didn't turn out aggressively in 2020 for the early vote. They didn't turn out in 2022 for the early vote, and they're turning out now. And you talk to Republicans, I realize there's some concern that maybe it's just an election day voter turning out now, so they're not picking up extra votes. But this sustained momentum does seem to be historically anomalous for Republican patterns in Georgia.
Yeah, no question. And, I've got a pretty broad circle of friends and acquaintances all over the state. And I'm having people who have been historically Democratic voters reaching out to me saying, look, I'm voting for Trump. What other Republicans do I need to vote for on the ballot? That's been a common question that I've been getting, and it just boils down to the economy. Main thing, people are taking home less in their paychecks than they were 4 years ago, and the economy as well as public safety and what's going on at the border. That's really what's driving people's desires to want to vote for Trump this cycle. Is they're worried about the future of our economy, and we're obviously worried about the safety of our people, particularly with what's going on at the southern border, which is, one of the bigger issues that it only in the areas that it's really an issue in the border states that's being affected about it. But we're seeing a ripple effect even here in Georgia with uptick in crime by illegals and things of that nature. The stories, and so I think all those things have really put President Trump in a position to do very well next Tuesday.
Now, if you're just tuning in, I'm talking to Burt Jones, Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Trump surrogate. Do you have a sense? I know I talked to the Secretary of State here, and I'm going to have him on the program later this week to talk about how they're counting votes in Georgia, that Fulton County seems to have cleaned up its act a little bit. The primaries ran pretty smooth. They got the results in by 10 p.m. There's a guy on CNN last night who said it could be 2 weeks before Georgia knows who's going to win. I don't know that I agree with that. Was wondering how your sense is and how things are performing out there just as a matter of just the mechanics of the election.
Yeah, obviously we changed some ways that we did things after the 2020 election. Obviously, if you lived in Georgia like you and I have, Fulton County has had issues way before 2020 And so that's always been something. They've always been slow at getting results, but we do feel pretty confident about. Number one, that you've had so much early voting that it's come in, so it's obviously you doubt that you will have the number of in-day voting to have to count for, and also on the absentee ballots and everything, we're going to have it where that similar to Florida, where they can start tabulating those absentee ballots on election day. They don't have to wait till the close of day to do so. So I think that will help speed the process along. I will be very surprised if we do not know the results that evening of election night, and I hope we do. Obviously, we've had our differences with the Secretary of State's office, but we also have been able to work together on some things, and so I'm hopeful that we will have a lot smoother process this election cycle.
I sure hope so. Listen, it's always good to talk to you. It was great to see you this weekend, and God bless you out on the campaign trail. 1 week left, and then maybe we can all take a nap.
Yeah, Eric, I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate everything you do. I always enjoy listening to you. So have a good week, and, hopefully I'll see you after Tuesday next week.
Thanks so much. Take care. Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones in Georgia, one of the top Trump surrogates in the state, and again, I'm glad he's with me on this. In fact, let me play you this audio. This is from last night on CNN.
By 8 p.m. on election night, they should have up to 70% of their votes in Georgia. So that's great. But if it's really close, it might not matter. It could take many days. There could be overseas ballots that they have to count, provisional ballots, all of these things. In a very tight election, everything you do might not help. And then there are states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin where efforts to reform the process have stalled essentially. So they're not counting these these mail-in ballots. They're not processing them early. So things could go quickly there. And in a really tight election, it could take a while. I mean, the record, we all remember, 2000, 36 days. Hopefully it's not that this year.
We don't want to go through that. And I'm with the Lieutenant Governor. So many of the votes are going to be banked by Election Day here in the state of Georgia. I hope we can move very quickly. But, I mean, again, Lieutenant Governor in Georgia is everywhere right now. He was in Forsyth County, Georgia, which is north of Atlanta, with me on Saturday. He's been all over the place with Donald Trump. He's been in Savannah. He's been in Zebulon. He's been in Paulding County, Georgia, which is northwest of Atlanta. He's been in Atlanta. The Trump team itself is going everywhere. Now, contrast that with Kamala Harris. I thought this was very interesting. The Joe Rogan team today is announcing that they invited Kamala Harris to be on his podcast and that her team said he would have to go to her and it could only last an hour. Rogan declined. News outlets are saying Rogan refused to accommodate Kamala Harris. That's media bias in the way the story is being told. Joe Rogan never has restricted times for the people he interviews. That's one of the conditions to go on Rogan's show is you got to take the time. She refused. Also, they all have to go to him in Austin. He doesn't go to them. That Kamala Harris refused to go to Austin, Texas, and refused to give Joe Rogan the time he wanted to have a conversation is a pretty big indication she doesn't want the presidency as badly as Donald Trump. And I think that's just a reality. Also, I think her campaign recognizes she's lost the male vote and instead is doing everything they can to maximize the vote for women to offset the male vote. And I don't know that she's going to get enough of the female vote to offset the male vote, assuming men show up. Because one of the things that the Democrats are distracted by is that married white women, according to the polling, are breaking slightly for Donald Trump. And as a class of voter, they tend to vote more than single women. That's another big red flag there as the candidates crisscross the nation. Thanks to Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones of Georgia for coming on and talking about the Trump team's efforts in the state of Georgia, one of the big 7 swing states out there. I personally think Trump wins Georgia, and there's a growing body of evidence. The Democrats think so too, particularly when they say don't look to 2020, look to 2022, a midterm. You can't compare a midterm and a presidential year turnout. When Democrats say that, they know they've lost. I have to publicly and for the record as I come back express some disappointment to you guys. I'm in studio, the flagship studio, no less. And Jim is in here overseeing Vinny on the board. And I reference that Vinny is not my cousin. Neither of these gentlemen has seen my cousin Vinny. This is where we're going to have to do a field trip at some point. And Philip, have I made you see Mike? I think I've made you see my cousin Vinny. It's such great. I've let my kids see my cousin Vinny. My son loves my cousin Vinny. If you've never watched my cousin Vinny, ladies and gentlemen, you need to watch my cousin Vinny. What is a grit? It's the greatest. It is a fantastic movie. Now, I'll move on. I want to talk about go back to some foreign affairs issues from yesterday in the next half hour. But right now, I need to just mention this because I got a couple emails from people who weren't here yesterday on the Puerto Rico line. Democratic super PACs are warning Kamala Harris's team that calling Donald Trump a fascist is not persuading people to vote for Harris. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion that if you're a voter on the sidelines and you're leaning towards Donald Trump, and January 6th did not turn you against Donald Trump, and a fascism play did not turn you against Donald Trump, and claiming Donald Trump praised Adolf Hitler's generals, who, by the way, tried to assassinate Adolf Hitler, did not turn you against Donald Trump, and all the charges of racism did not turn you against Donald Trump, I have a real hard time believing that Tony Hinchcliffe's lying about Puerto Rico being a garbage island is going to turn you against Puerto Rico. I have a real hard time convincing myself that if all of these other things did not turn you against Donald Trump, that suddenly, oh my gosh, a comedian made a bad joke at a Trump rally. I'm not voting for Donald Trump because of that comedian. I have a really hard time buying that argument. Politico is out just completely gobbling up the Democratic spin of Tony Hinchcliffe's joke is spreading through the Pennsylvania Puerto Rico community, costing Donald Trump votes. I just have a hard time believing it, particularly when I know Democrats make it, they are able to spin so much easier than the Republicans' reporters. I just don't know that I agree with the spin. I mean, we'll see. When we come back, though, we got to move on to foreign affairs. We got some big news I need to put on your radar with North Korea that I didn't get to yesterday that's cropped up. First, I got to tell you about Americans for Prosperity. By the way, National Review is running a story about Americans for Prosperity's ground game, that it happens to be the largest ground game in the United States, using their army of activists going door to door to make sure people are getting out to vote. You can go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer if you'd like to be a part of the project. They've got chapters in almost every state. I know they have a great chapter in my state in Georgia. They've got a great chapter in California. They've got great chapters pretty much every state now. Texas, an amazing one. Florida as well. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. You go sign up with Americans for Prosperity. They can teach you the skills of going to your neighbors, seeing if they're registered to vote, helping them get registered to vote, getting them out to vote, advocating common sense conservative solutions. You go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. AFP has chapters in almost every state. You can be a part of your local one. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. Go sign up with them today to be an effective conservative activist. Greetings, conversationalists. It is Eric Erickson here across America. The phone number is 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program. By the way, I got to thank all of you again yesterday for chiming in on the piano issue with my son. I think we got a couple of really good options. We had a couple of brands that I had never even heard of. He is so set on a Steinway, but Daddy can't afford a Steinway unless I sell the kid who wants the Steinway, so it's not going to happen. Nonetheless, we got options. Now, I could sell his sister. No. As I get canceled here on my own show for making jokes. I want to turn back to foreign affairs because we got a couple of data points. One of them, I got to read you an excerpt. This is from Bob Carlin and Siegfried Hecker at 38 North, which is a site tracking Korea, the situation on the Korean Peninsula. The situation is more dangerous than it has been at any time since early June 1950. This may sound overly dramatic, but we believe that, like his grandfather in 1950, Kim Jong-un has made a strategic decision to go to war. We do not know when or how Kim plans to pull the trigger, but the danger is already far beyond the routine warnings in Washington, Seoul, and Tokyo about Pyongyang's provocations. In other words, we do not see the war preparation themes in North Korean media appearing since the beginning of last year as typical bluster from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Raising the specter of Pyongyang's decision to go to a military solution, in effect to give warning of war, in the absence of hard evidence is fraught. Typically, it will be met with the by now routine argument that Kim Jong-un would not dare take such a step because he knows Washington and Seoul would destroy his regime if he does so. If this is what policymakers are thinking, it is the result of a fundamental misreading of Kim's view of history and a grievous failure of imagination that could be leading on both Kim's and Washington's parts to a disaster. They are beginning a series of constructions at the east and west border crossings. They're clearing land. They're digging wide trenches to appear to be concrete sides. The nature of the construction is uncertain, but they're adding a level of permanence to a severed cross-border infrastructure. The West Coast crossing connected South Korea's Dorison border station with a North Korean road that led into an industrial zone. The crossing is part of the Asian Highway 1, a UN-backed highway scheme that connects Tokyo in the east to Turkey in the west. While both South Korea and North Korea are signatories, driving through North Korea has only ever been theoretical. Yet they're doing something. The road has not been regularly used. Around December of 2023, a series of trenches were dug across the road just north of the South Korean gate. The trenches appeared weeks before Kim Jong-un delivered a speech calling South Korea an enemy state. It's not possible to determine if the two actions were linked. There's clearly something happening in North Korea near its border with South Korea. There are clearly developments building. There's also some level of strategic partnership that is developing between North Korea and Russia. A failure to understand the history of North Korean policy over the last 33 years is not simply an academic problem. Getting that history wrong has dangerous implications. Without grasping in detail what, why, and how North Korean policy retained its central goal of normalizing relationships with the United States from 1990 until 2019, there's no way to understand the change that's taken place. The bedrock policy shift by Kim to grid for a war would only come after he concluded all other options have been exhausted. Although Pyongyang's decision-making often appears ad hoc and short-sighted, in fact, the North Koreans view the world strategically and from a long-term perspective. Beginning with the crucial strategic decision by Kim Il-sung in 1990, the North pursued a policy centered on the goal of normalizing relationships as a buffer against China and Russia. After initial movements in that direction, successive U.S. administrations pulled away from engagement and ignored North Korean initiatives. And now, North Korea may be drawn into the Russians and the Chinese. Now, here's another one. This is from the Washington Post, Nicholas Eberstadt. With the dispatch of thousands of North Korean special forces toward the front lines in Russia's war against Ukraine, a development first reported by the South Korean and Ukrainian intelligence sources and now confirmed by the United States, the emerging contours of global struggle in the post-Cold War are coming into sharper focus. As North Korean soldiers head into possible combat in Europe, the degree of their ultimate military involvement might turn out to be much greater than generally anticipated. A world island-style contest seems to be falling into place. Four ambitious revisionist states at the heart of Eurasia, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, are coordinating ever more closely to challenge, if not shatter, the international security order known as the Pax Americana. World Island was geostrategist Halford Mackinder's memorable description of Eurasia plus Africa in his 1919 book, Democratic Ideals and Reality, which expanded on an essay, The Geophysical Pivot of History. He prophesied whoever ruled Eastern Europe commands the heartland of Europe. Whoever rules the heartland commands the world island. Who rules the world island commands the world. Now, here's another data point. This is from Reuters. The United States has said it will not impose new limits on Ukraine's use of American weapons if North Korea enters the fight. The North Korean deployment is fanning Western concerns that the 2.5-year conflict in Ukraine could widen, even as attention shifts to the Middle East. It could be a sign of how Russia hopes to offset mounting battlefield losses and continue making slow, steady gains in eastern Ukraine. Now, combine that with this story from the Wall Street Journal. The United States is running low on some air defense missiles, raising questions about the Pentagon's readiness to respond to the continuing wars in the Middle East and Europe and a potential conflict in the Pacific. Interceptors are fast becoming the most sought-after ordnance during the widening crisis in the Middle East, as Israel and other U.S. allies face an increasing threat from missiles and drones fired by Iran. On top of that, this is from the Times of London, China has intensified combat-ready patrols involving jets, drones, and warships around Taiwan after the United States approved $2 billion worth of arms sales to Taiwan. On top of that, Israel's airstrikes early Saturday didn't just destroy critical Iranian military infrastructure, they battered the reputation of Russia's military equipment, which was pummeled by poor performance during Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Let me paint a scenario for you based on all these stories. Let me paint a scenario for you that is increasingly probable. The Venezuelans invade Guyana. North Korea attacks South Korea. China invades Taiwan. And Iran attacks Israel as Russian and North Koreans stream across into Ukraine. You have a world at war immediately. And we're on defense. We are not on defense, contrary to popular claims by some on the right, because of all of our armaments given to Israel and Ukraine. Although that's part of it, for sure, there is a shortage. Our bigger problem is structural. Our Navy is unable to build ships at a rapid clip. Repairs have become slow and costly. Our military-industrial complex has become slow. It's very bureaucratic. It's backed up. It's inefficient. Meanwhile, it seems very clear China, North Korea, Venezuela, Iran, Russia, they're all increasingly coordinating. And their goal in their coordination is to take out the United States from the field of play. Now, how would they do that? A tactical strike on Norfolk, the world's largest military harbor. That would do it. Pearl Harbor, the West Coast. Maybe we're not attacked in any way, shape, or form. We still couldn't get to Taiwan in time. We wouldn't be able to reinforce our supply lines to South Korea quickly. We would kind of have to let the British deal with Guyana. It's their territory. Israel and Ukraine, suddenly NATO, the lines are crossed. All of Europe's at war with Russia. You can see this building, and it is an uncomfortable scenario to think about. So what do we do with it? American resolve. American resolve can change things. And I don't know that either party, that's my concern with J.D. Vance's statements on Europe and Ukraine, Donald Trump's on NATO, Kamala Harris is waffling on Israel. I don't know that either political party in the United States has the resolve to ensure American leadership in the world, to fix the supply chain issues with our military, to fix the procurement issues with the military, to give a robust defense. We're setting rules for engagement in Ukraine that Russia repeatedly breaks, and we're still not allowing the Ukrainians to cross the line. By the way, you now have a sabotage effort a week in Finland by the Russians. Did you know this? Here's your other data point. They're a NATO ally. Once a week now, the Russians are sabotaging the power grid, supply lines, bridges, data infrastructure in Finland. They're probing the Finnish response. They're probing NATO's commitment to respond. All of these should be big red flags for the United States. The Russians are probing the border with NATO, not just Europe. And on top of all of this, you've got a collapse of the German political infrastructure. Their ruling coalition's in power, but the three-party alliance doesn't have the votes to get anything done in the parliament. You've got a dementia patient in charge of the United States who's not fully engaged, and you've got willfully naive bureaucrats in charge of the State Department and the Pentagon. You've got a potential Iranian sympathizer now at the highest ranks of the Pentagon. You have Chinese spies within. We're being played by the enemy. And by the way, they're our enemy. They're not just some different nation that disagrees with us. They're not just a rival. They're an enemy. And the shadows are starting to spread. You can see it. And I don't know that either party has the resolve to deal with it in the way it must be resolved. It's one reason I continue to support funding Ukraine, because I don't want my kids to have to go to war. And they will have to go to war if we do not have strong resolve to discourage Russia's engagement in Europe or to discourage China's surrounding of Taiwan. Our children will have to go to war if America decides to take a step backwards, because the world will descend into chaos. We must preserve American leadership of the world. And to do that, we have to recognize that we don't have to go to war, but we got to support our allies. The North Koreans, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, and the Venezuelans are rapidly beginning to coordinate to try to throw us off our game. And we have a dementia patient of the White House with his vice president running for president, and she's just as bad as he is. But on the other side, we've got a bunch of isolationists now who are, their experts are as bad as the Democratic experts. This isn't a good setup for any of us, and our enemies around the world recognize it. Happy thoughts here. Happy thoughts. Let me tell you about Vision Computer before I go to break. At Vision Computer, they can build you a computer that is going to be better than any computer you get at the one-size-big box store. They're going to get you a computer that you actually want, that actually meets your needs. They can work with you on the GPU, on the memory, on the hard drive space, on the monitor, the number of monitors, all that sort of stuff. They'll work with you. And then you get their 5-star tech support. So if you ever have a question, you call Vision Computer, one-stop shop. Call Vision Computer, they take care of it. One-stop shop. In fact, you get a special phone number. So you call them at 404-COMPUTE and you get set up with them, and then you get a special phone number. You call that phone number, and in 15 seconds or less, you get the answer. You don't know how to do something. You're confused about something doesn't seem to work right. You need email support, printer support. Vision can take care of you, and you get it for free because you bought your computer from Vision. You call them at 404-COMPUTE and bought a computer from them. But hey, let's say you want their world-class tech support and you don't have a computer from them. For $179 a year per computer, they can do it for you. So think about it. You've got a small business. You've got 10 employees. You can't afford a 6-figure salary for an IT guy. You can afford $179 a year for Vision Computers per computer. They'll be your tech support. Your employees all get the phone number. Call Vision. Vision takes care of them. All you need to do is call them today at 404-COMPUTE and tell them I sent you. They'll save you even more money. Tell them Eric sent you. Call them at 404-COMPUTE, any one of you nationwide, 404-COMPUTE, or go to visioncomputers.com today. You will not be surprised to learn that The Atlantic has come out and endorsed Kamala Harris. Of course, what you obviously would know if you have ever engaged with The Atlantic is that they're deeply progressive and they hate Donald Trump, so it's no surprise at all. What I continue to find interesting is just the psychology of progressives who demand that their worldview be affirmed, and they get angry when it's not affirmed. They're always told by their friends in the press that they're right, and so when someone in the press refuses to go along with them, they get deeply, deeply angry about it, such is the case with the Washington Post deciding it's not going to endorse anymore. They just can't handle it. And you know, they're mad at Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, for saying Donald Trump's not a fascist. He disagrees with the reporters asking him, and he disagrees with the Democrats on this. He and Trump have had a pretty good relationship.
And they're talking about these real problems we're having. And with all that's going on to everyday New Yorkers, we're asking questions that is someone a fascist or is someone a Hitler. That's insulting to me. That is insulting. And I'm not going to engage in that. Everyone needs to turn down the rhetoric.
That is Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, getting assaulted by Democrats, accusing him of all sorts of corrupt influence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in large part because they're mad that he's not willing to say that Donald Trump's a fascist. They're just not willing to do it. Meanwhile, before I get out of here, J.D. Vance is in Michigan. And he's talking to two different groups of people. Just happened on the campaign trail. Here he is for Palestinian Arab American voters.
Next question.
Hello, Senator. My name is AJ Jones, WCMU local public radio station. I have a question about foreign policy.
Sure.
This week, the Israeli parliament passed a law that would ban UNRWA, the United Nations Refugee Agency for the Palestinians. The Biden administration opposed that decision. Now, I want to give you the floor here. Would a Trump-Vance administration support Israel banning UNRWA? And as a follow-up, would you earmark any federal aid for humanitarian causes in Gaza as the current administration has?
So, a couple of things. First of all, of course, we want to save as many civilians, both Israeli and Palestinian, as possible. The most important way to do that is to end the war. And this is why I think that Donald J. Trump, I've never seen anything like it in American politics, where you've got the people in the United States who are a little bit more pro-Palestinian and the people in the United States who are a little bit more pro-Israel. I think they recognize, both of them, that Donald J. Trump is the best candidate because he's the candidate of peace and prosperity.
That was him with the Palestinians, also supporting the automakers, saying, I love the big three automakers in the state of Michigan. I want the big three automakers to thrive and survive, but they're not going to if we keep forcing electric vehicles down their throats. The auto workers of the crowd went wild as he's in Michigan having a big impact. It turns out, despite the Democratic spin, J.D. Vance is a far more important and better surrogate than Tim Walz is for Harris. All right, tomorrow we'll be within 6 days of the election.